This is a video I've been practically deliberating on making for months now, and for several reasons, okay? So, you know what? I'm just going to do it. That'll show my apprehensions. Okay, hi, yes. It's as the title states. I started studying Japanese when I was 15 and now I'm 23. So, yes, 8 years in total. Okay. And finally, I feel like I have something to say about studying Japanese. Now, as a disclaimer, this is not a how to study video, nor is it a how to speak fluently video. For starters, everybody will ultimately find their own ways to study, and plus, achieving fluency is kind of an impossible task, and in my opinion, a misguided way of approaching learning a language. Truthfully, no one's fluent even in their own language. I feel like we just know enough of it to talk about how shady our friends were in high school, or to talk about our unpopular opinions on maybe like movies or books or whatever. This video is more of a video format detailing my experiences in the hope that it can serve as a relieving reminder that learning a language will take your wallet and it will take your sanity, but most importantly, it will take your time and a lot of it as well. And it's as they say, good things come with time. I know people my age and younger get pegged as like being impatient, but look, who really wants to be studying for years on end just to watch anime without subtitles? Like, if you told me I could do what I can do right now and do it in 4 years instead of eight, I would have been on it, because who has time for that, I have so many anime in my backlog that I haven't watched. Like, I need all the time I can get. But in all seriousness, though, for a whole 8 years, I've been hitting those books and writing those kanji, and it's been hard, it's been fun. And hey, if you're a day in studying Japanese, or a week, or a month, or a year, or 2 years, you know what? Give yourself a pat on the back because hey, you have made a very, hefty decision to basically study a language that can be very difficult to understand. Okay, so just for making that leap alone, you have done yourself a very good favor. Well done, guys. Well, with that disclaimer over, I would just like to give my thanks to the teachers who have taught me Japanese over the years. Without them, I would have been by myself, not understanding, not hitting those books, and not reading those kanji. So I just like to say to those teachers, if you are watching this video, which I hope not, but in the event that you do, I would just like to say, 教えてくれて本当にありがとうございます。感謝しています。本当に。So, with all that being said, let's start this video, guys. Come on. Technically, I've already started the video, but I need to talk to some of my people, okay, about learning Japanese because you like anime or manga, okay? But now, this is not to shame you because I'll be doing the equivalent of throwing a boomerang and expecting it not to hit me right in the face, okay? But things do need to be said because, especially if you're looking to learn this language long term. So if you want to learn Japanese and learn certain phrases or get to a certain level, but definitely far from a native, then you know what, go ahead. But if you want to be like me and study Japanese for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you need to learn some things, okay? When you say, alright, I want to understand anime without subtitles, all I'm hearing is I want to be very proficient in Japanese, and I don't know the full implications of that. That's all I hear. I was you once. Naive, tired of waiting for the translators to get my favorite mangas on my favorite illegal websites, okay? There she was, 13 years of age. I thought I had an epiphany of thoughts. Wow, I'm reading all this manga in English, waiting, being like, if I study Japanese, I could read all the manga I want. That was me, okay? 8 years ago, okay? 8 years ago, no, 10 years ago, oh my gosh. That was me 10 years ago. Technically, I did achieve that goal of being able to read manga in Japanese, but not until like 6 years later. You see, younger me wasn't very realistic about her goals and how to achieve those goals. I was only really thinking about the outcome, what I wanted to do. Should I acquire a level in Japanese? And I wasn't really thinking about all the time, effort, and money it would take to get there. Another thing I want to say, and I think other people have said it before, Japanese is like a whole language, okay? And anime and manga is only but a fraction of the language. There's a lot to Japanese that you're not going to find in like your rom-com slice of life animes or your isekai sort of reincarnation stories where, everybody magically, has all these skills and pseudo-European names. So, I'd like to advise my fellow anime and manga fans to kind of question themselves and especially ask themselves these two very important questions before you really dedicate a lot of time into studying Japanese. One, is enjoying this material in its native language a priority to me? Two, am I willing to expend a lot of time, effort, and money into learning Japanese solely for this reason? There's nothing wrong with anime and manga being your inspiration to learn Japanese, but if it's the only propelling force into you studying this language, you need to think like, am I gonna really be hype about Haikyuu 5 years down the line? Am I really going to care about this current hit manga 5 years down the line? So really think, because all of the manga, all of the anime that younger me wanted to enjoy in its native language, you know what, I probably can't even remember the names of them. Like, even if I wanted to go back and read them or watch them, I do not care about them anymore, which is kind of sad, but time changes people, okay? Sad to say, but it's true. Also, your goal of understanding anime without subtitles, that's a very hefty goal and it's not going to be instantaneous. You're not going to get it maybe as quickly as you want. I am telling you this now so you do not get disappointed. If you're like me, okay, well, if you were like me, 13, and you really wanted to understand, like, you wanted to read anime without subtitles. You know what? Let me tell you this. I'm 23. I've been studying Japanese for 8 years. I can comfortably watch Japanese, watch anime without subtitles. But there are times when, I put those subtitles right on because you know what? I am not fluent. I may be highly proficient in Japanese, but I am definitely not, fluent, even though I don't really believe in fluency. But let me just say it just for the sake. I am not fluent, just highly proficient. I may have started because of manga and anime, but now I have so many things about the language that, just truly keep me going. Like, I want to get these little in-jokes I see in the YouTube comments of my favorite YouTubers. I want to understand the language enough that I could do it potentially as a job. Like, there is so much has happened over these past 8 years that I probably didn't think would happen when I first decided to get into studying Japanese. And I want to just say that that is part of learning the language. Like, learning the language is not you opening your books, opening your notebooks, and making pretty little displays and learning all the vocabulary and speaking to people. A lot of it is your mentality, is your experiences, is what you ultimately want to gain from developing this skill and trying to learn something that you have a genuine interest in. And heck, maybe you won't have a genuine interest years down the line, but don't feel sad if that day comes, because you might find another language. To me, learning is change, and I'm glad that I changed. I still like shoujo manga. In fact, shoujo manga is practically the only manga that I read. But I read shoujo manga now, and I started watching political videos. Now I watch the Japanese government have debates on like the Olympics. That's just how my um that's just how much I've changed from 30-year-old me who just wanted to watch all these animes to 23-year-old me who can comfortably watch a 1.5 hour video on the cinema industry. That to me is change. That to me is proof that I have spent a lot of good time studying something that truly has changed my life in a lot of ways. So, because it's been 8 years, I have a lot of things I want to talk about, and I'm trying to be as consistent and organized in talking about these things as possible. So, I have like a little list of things. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is my triumphs, because I'm trying to be a positive force in the world, and also congratulate myself on things and not always be so despondent and critical of myself. So the first triumph that I want to talk about is my listening skills. I know that's weird to say, because most of the time when people talk about learning Japanese, they usually focus on how well they can speak the language. And I can speak Japanese, like, okay, I can, but to me, where my pride is, where my confidence lies, is not in my speaking skills, okay? It is in my listening. Like, I'm not even trying to be like snooty or uppity, but my listening skills are sick. Like, 今のところ8割くらい聞き取れるレベルだと思うけど、So, like, about 80% of a video or anything, like テレビ番組, TV programs, or songs, like, I can understand that, and I feel that listening skills in Japanese are kind of underrated, because a lot of the times it's just we're trying to process all this information. You want to know how to say this in Japanese and this in Japanese, and sometimes you need to sit back, relax, and listen to what the other person is saying, because conversations are what? A two-way street. That's right, guys. It's a two-way street. Like, I'm not really a talker anyways, even in English. Like, if I have nothing to say, I would just not say anything. So where I really put a lot of my time into studying was listening. Like, first I started with manzai comedy videos, so I used to watch a lot of those, and then like asadora, which are like these dramas that air in the mornings, and they usually are trying to teach you some kind of moral lesson, or like virtue or whatever. And then gaming let's play videos, and then fashion YouTubers. I've listened to a lot of things over these past 8 years, and it has truly helped me understand Japanese to a greater level than if I had solely spent all my time focusing on speaking. For my listening skills, I learned that there are so many ways to speak the language. Like the way that a 40-year-old and a 14-year-old speaks Japanese, there are a lot of little nuances that when you pick up on them, it's like, oh, like that's what the young people are saying, or that's what the older peeps are saying. Like, it makes you feel like you're getting just a little bit more of the language, and I just think that's really cool. Also, as like a little tip, maybe, Being a good listener also helps with your speaking skills. Like a common mistake, well, not maybe a mistake, but it's something that kind of lets me know that, oh, this person is still quite a beginner at Japanese, is that people, like when you speak in a conversation, it's like you also have to pick up what the other person is saying. You can't just say what you want to say. And a lot of the times, beginners will start their sentences with watashi wa, like watashi no namae wa Tanisha desu, watashi wa 23 歳 desu, like always talking about yourself. And in a real life conversation, you also need to pick up on what the other person is. There's this thing called aisuji, which is like these little sounds that you make while you're listening to someone speak, and you don't really get it in English. So when I first started speaking in Japanese, when the other person was talking, I'd literally be like, and then they'll be thinking, oh, are you not listening? So it kind of gives that little, it's a little spice. You'd be like, hi, so listen it up, so this car. That little will help you, like, it will make you sound like more fluent, even if you're saying the most basic stuff. I promise you. Try it out next time. Or when someone says something, like, just do remix on what they said. So you're like, ピザ好きですか？ピザは、私の好物ですね。好物といえば、何々くんの好物は何ですか？ Like, that little, just doing the remix on it will help so much, I promise you. So try that out next time you speak Japanese. Like, make sure to really listen to what the other person is saying, and make sure to be an active listener, and you'll find that that will help boost your speaking skills a lot more than just learning new grammar functions and learning new vocabulary. Because what's the point of all those grammar functions and vocabularies when you don't even know when to use them in the conversation? But if it doesn't work, don't let me know. Do not tell me, because I will get sad. Now, my triumph number 2 in learning Japanese over these past 8 years is that my perseverance is still hard. Like, work hard, Dwayne Johnson the work hard. Like, if you knew how many times I have come close to just throwing in the towel, being like, well, I will never understand this language, so why even try? Like, if you knew how many times I was at that point, like, you would be concerned for my well-being, because it's been quite a lot. But when that's happened, I've managed to power through and just basically, continue studying Japanese. And I feel that's a very important skill to have that is beyond just, understanding and learning. Like, to get a little bit more personal, at one point, Japanese was like the only subject I would look forward to in high school. Like, when I was 15, my first experience really learning Japanese was in a class of 10 people. So it was a very tight knit community, and we were just all in it together, all not understanding, and it was fun at one point to not understand, because, we're all dummies. So it was kind of like a very sort of encouraging environment to be. It was kind of a vibe. And then when I got older, not understanding the language anymore, it stopped being fun. It just became very frustrating. So at that point, I had stopped studying in that class because I was now 17, 18, and now I had a Japanese tutor who I was doing private lessons with. And a lot of the times I wasn't understanding, so I would be very sad, very frustrated, I was like to my teacher, like, more, like, I don't know, like, akiramitai, like, I want to give up. And so then in response, he would be like, ja, akirameru ka? Like, do you want to give up? And I was like, do I? Do I really? And I ultimately decided not to. And kind of that question back then, like him asking me whether I wanted to give up has contributed to my current thinking about like potential and possibilities. But when he asked me that question, ja akinamedega, like whether or not I wanted to give up, it kind of helped shape how I view my language learning and my mentality towards it, which I think has really been very important into allowing me to continue learning this language for so long. Quick side note, I've been studying Japanese for 8 years, obviously, you probably knew already by the title. But actually, I started learning Korean or Hangul in starting just January. And one of the biggest worries I have, because now my study schedule is kind of, I have to switch between learning Japanese and Korean. One of my worries is that, oh, I will forget my Japanese and I won't be able to do both at the same time. And when I have those worries, you know, I have to ask myself, okay, do I want to give up? Do I want to stop? No, I don't want to give up. I want to continue doing this. So I kind of put aside my worries and go, okay, for the time being, let me just try. It might not go to plan, it might not turn out the way that I want to, but let me try because I want to see what my Korean study could be a year down the line. So I don't want to give up on both of them. I kind of want to eat my cake and have it, but you know what? I'm a very hungry gal. I'm a very hungry gal. Anyways, I need to stop. That's not funny. So I'm like, if I keep trying and I keep trying, then eventually there'll be this amazing future waiting for me where, I can speak a little bit of Korean too. But I don't plan to go as deep into Korean like I'm doing with Japanese. Japanese, this is like, oh, I'm probably going to be studying Japanese for a very long time. And you know what? I'm going to do my best. Ganbarimasu, guys. Come on. So now I want to talk about my mistakes, and I'm going to try and approach it in the same way. Because usually when people talk about their mistakes learning a language, they usually talk about what they actually did or their study methods. But you know, I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to bring something else to the table. I'm trying to give you a little bit of something, something. Like I don't just want to say, "Oh, I did this wrong and I did this wrong," and you should have like, come on, then let's talk about something else. Give a little bit of. So, whenever somebody talks about learning a skill, they'll usually talk like, okay, I didn't have a proper schedule and I didn't dedicate enough time and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And they'll also say how it's important to have mistakes and how failing is a necessary skill and just part of the process. And I'm here today to tell you that yes, they are right. Making mistakes and failing is definitely a part of the learning process and it's something that you definitely cannot avoid. And so you should just give up trying and just accept that you're going to make mistakes. Let me tell you, like, story time. Let me tell you about the mistake that will haunt me, that I still think about while I was in Japan. So I went to Japan in 2017 and I was so hyped, like finally, like I get to speak Japanese in Japan. So I went to like a curry shop or whatever where you can buy like a curry restaurant, like where you can eat curry and rice. Curry and rice so delicious, and I like spinach, right? And if you look at the kanji for so, because I wanted horenso, like curry, so curry that had spinach in it. Horenso is spinach in Japanese, but I read it horensha, like kuruma no sha, and I said it to the and I was like, she was like, what do you want? And I'm like, koko, horensha no curry, like that will haunt me. Anyways, story time over. But I made a mistake in Japan, bro. If you're not in Japan and you're making mistakes, that's think about me next time you are sad about making mistakes. I went to the country where it's spoken and I make a mistake over there. Okay? Just think about that. So, to actually get into the real mistakes that I want to talk about, my first mistake is that I thought I had to learn like everybody else. So obviously the internet can be a very toxic place to be, but then it can also have so much information, and there's just such a huge well of resources, especially now. Like back then, they did not, the videos that I'm seeing now on how to study Japanese didn't exist when I wanted to start. Like things have changed so much. There is so much resources, and I can sympathize with how I guess how daunting it probably is for new learners, especially to find all this information and all these people talking about how they study and how they do this. And you're seeing all of this and you're trying to figure out, okay, let me take this from this video and this from that book and this from this article. And you're trying to cobble this kind of perfect, language learning method that's going to get you guaranteed results. And sometimes you have to kind of step back from that. And for me, I thought, well, if people are focusing on speaking, I should focus on speaking. And if people are focusing on drilling and writing kanji 10,000 times to understand kanji, I should do that. And I wasn't really thinking about my own brain in a sense. I wasn't really thinking about myself. I was thinking about kind of making a studying method for somebody else that wasn't me, and not really thinking about whether or not it was going to help me. And if I didn't understand by the end of my study method, or by the end of this particular, lesson or this particular resource, then obviously I'm not trying hard enough. Like that's just proof I'm not equipped to learn Japanese. If I don't understand, then that means, oh, well, it's impossible. But that's not the case, especially not for me. Like if you've been using a particular study method, or if you've been, using this app, or if you've been stuck on this lesson for days and days and days on end, ask yourself this. Are you really trying to get your brain to remember something? Are you really trying to learn? Because learning is not just going through the motions. You have to actively try and encourage your brain to take information. And for me, I really took information in lots of different ways, and I only really knew this by this kind of trial and error process. And even now, I still sometimes feel like, well, if they're doing it, I should do it too. But no, I forget words, I forget kanji. And just because I learned it once, and just because I've learned it twice, and just because I've learned it 3 times, it doesn't mean that automatically I should be able to know it. Sometimes I just have to kind of nudge my brain and go, hey, that word, let's learn it again, And that was my first mistake that I made. Like, get to know yourself, get to know your brain. Like, in the long run, is going to be a very important process to your language learning, especially for Japanese. I'd like to just put it out there. So, my second mistake I would like to talk about is getting overly hyperfixated on something, well, on certain things. I know this sounds a lot like my first mistake, but let me just go into an experience I had and what I ended up doing it because of that experience. So for my master's degree, I ended up studying Japanese studies. I graduated last year, and in 2019, when I just started the course, there were a lot of exchange students from Japan, and so there was like a language exchange thing. And so I was, giving my jisho self-introduction. So I remember I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was very simple, like, はじめまして、私の名前はタニーシャです。日本語学を勉強しています。よろしくお願いします。Like something like that. So I said that, and then the girl was like, タニーシャの日本語ってアニメキャラみたい. Like your Japanese is like an anime character. And I was like, an anime character? And this made me really this really influenced my Japanese learning for like an entire year. Like I just stopped doing this, being so fixated on it like a couple of months ago. And the only reason I stopped is because I spoke of this experience to somebody else. And he was like, isn't it just because your voice is high that is if you have a high voice? And I was like, wait, that's why she said that? And not because she thinks my Japanese is unnatural? So I was so like, oh my days. Every time somebody would ask me like, Tanishi no Nihongo no benkyou wa dou? And I'd be like, motto shizen ni hanashitai kara, ima wa, benkyou wa sono jisho ni benkyou shite imasu. Like something like that. Like I was convinced my Japanese was unnatural or fushizan, like, so I wanted to speak really, really naturally. And so I ended up buying this book. Is Sono Mama no Nihongo, Learning Japanese with Everyday Conversation. I ended up buying this. And I ended up buying this, Nihongo Hanashikata Training. So I bought 2 books to really help in my speaking, and I was so convinced that my speaking, that the reason why she said my voice was like an anime character, or my Japanese was like an anime character, was because I was speaking it wrong. And letting yourself get swayed by people's quips and by people's like little comments can really affect your learning process or your learning journey. And now it's just one example of how one person's comment led me on a journey of an entire year and some change to try and speak more fluently, I guess. And you know what? I don't really regret having done that. I mean, it was fun. I certainly know a lot more now than I did back then. So I wouldn't say I lost out or anything. I just think my mistake was that I was too hyper focused on that comment, and I was convinced that I was doing something wrong. And sometimes our mistake is that we think we're doing something wrong. And I think in society, it's always about improvement. It's always about, how to get better at doing this, how to get better at doing that. Oh, everything you're doing, everything you know, you're wrong, you're bad. And that can really hurt your trust because you're thinking, wow, I really just wasted all my time. Like, it can make you feel really sad. And I just want to tell you, and also tell me, that sometimes you are not doing anything wrong. Sometimes you are not making mistakes in that way. Sometimes your mistakes have nothing to do with the way that you're studying. So now I want to talk about some fun experiences. Well, maybe just one fun experience that I had when I was studying at a university in Cornwall. If you know the university, it's an art university. Cornwall in England is like right in the southwest, like right at the coast. And so one day I was walking, there's 2 campuses, so I was walking to the other campus, and there was this girl on the other side of the road, and I was just like, and there was a friend with her, and then she came up to me, and the weirdest thing happened. She spoke Japanese to me, and I'm like, why is she speaking Japanese to me? Like, this is rural country England. Like, we all speak English here. But because she spoke to me in Japanese first, I just responded in Japanese, right? And she was like, Nihongo hanasemasu ka? Like, you can speak Japanese. And I'm here thinking like, yeah. But then also I was just confused. Like, why did you just come up to me? Like, I don't know you. Why did you just come up to me and speak Japanese? And she said, you know what she said to me? This is like the best compliment I've ever gotten. So she said, you look like someone who could speak Japanese. I look like someone who could speak Japanese. Me, I look like someone who could speak Japanese. Like, I literally didn't do anything. And I was just there standing on a normal day. It was so strange, but that was a really fun experience. Like, we're here in the middle of the countryside, by the sea, nobody around. You've come across the road to talk to me in Japanese all of a sudden because you had an inkling that I potentially could speak Japanese. That was very fun. Now to talk about my not so fun experiences learning the language. My not so fun experiences, I guess, failing a JLPT, which is one of them. So there is the JLPT, or the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, is like a government, I guess, funded test that basically you can take in so many countries around the world, and it's just used as like kind of like a litmus test, like how much Japanese do you understand out in a very specific context. So there is vocab, grammar, listening, and reading. So there's 5 levels. JLPT N5 is the lowest, and then N1 is the highest. So I failed the N2 and the N1 once, and that wasn't fun because, okay, who wants to fail, honestly? And I remember my first time taking the N1, or I think my first time taking the N2, was it the N2? Yeah, I was, oh yeah. The first time I took the N2, I went to Japan straight afterwards, so I wouldn't know the results until I came back from Japan, and I was like, oh my days, I want to pass, gokaku shitai. And then when I got the results, it said fu gokaku, and I was like, like, but failing is just, I guess, a part of the process. But it wasn't fun failing exams, but I managed to pass in the end. So from failure comes success, I guess. Another not so fun experience was, I guess, just feeling kind of isolated from other language learners. Well, this was kind of like more when I was still in high school, when people were learning other languages, and kind of some of the reactions I'd get when I would tell people I was studying Japanese kind of threw me off sometimes. Like, okay, for example, say, so I don't know, I can't really remember, but somehow the conversation kind of gets towards like gets to a point where I tell people, oh, I can speak Japanese. And then obviously when you say that, the first thing people want to say is, okay, say something in Japanese then. So I'll do it. And then they would laugh at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it kind of made me feel sad because I'm like, what are you laughing at? Like, is it funny that I'm speaking Japanese? Is it because it's just weird to hear it come out of my mouth? And I guess this has nothing to do with learning the language, but it kind of feels a bit demotivating, and I don't want to be like that person, but there isn't really a lot of black people that are really popular in the language learning community on YouTube. Anyways, let me not talk about it. Let me just move on. Okay, so now let's talk about the resources. If you've clicked this part of the video, I'm just going to give it to you straight. I'm only going to talk about the resources that I have used or are still using and recommend. So I'm not going to go into, oh, should you use Duolingo because I've never used Duolingo? Should you use Memrise because I've never used Memrise? So I think I only used Memrise for a minute or something, like years ago. So I don't even know what it's like right now. Okay, my first recommendation. I have the book with me. Do it yourself. Beginner level Japanese grammar review. This is like a little DIY type of book. If you're a self-studier, if you don't have like classes or lessons or anything, buy this book. Buy this book. Because grammar, you're gonna need it. Okay, you're gonna need to understand it. So, all it is, let me find an example. It gives you all the necessary things you need to know. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. Okay? And it teaches you how to make them. So let me click this page. Page 53. Zuni. Okay? So it tells you how to make it. And you take the nai form of the verb, take off the nai, and you add the zuni. Okay? Except for suru, which becomes sezuni, alright? Don't say shinazuni, because that's wrong. So, and it gives you examples as well. It gives you the reibun, okay? 彼は何も言わずに部屋を出て行きました。Okay. Man said nothing and he left that room without saying anything. Okay. It teaches you to read the meaning. Then you put the book. Without ing. Okay. Third, it teaches you how to use it. So it's just a very useful book because learning certain aspects like passive, causative, and causative passive and potential can be so difficult by yourself. Like, I don't know, kikoeru, mieru, mirareru, like knowing the difference between mirareru and mieru is so hard by yourself. But this book will teach you. So buy this book. It's not even that expensive right now. The other book, well, for higher learners, so this isn't for beginners. The other book that I'd like to recommend is this book. This is for higher level people. I bought this from Amazon Japan. You can find a lot of Japanese language books. I literally bought this book and it only had like one review at the time, so I took a gamble and I bought this book. And I have to say, this book I used this book from September last year. I finished it now, so I finished all the lessons, and I would say this is a very it's basically what's the title? 上級編考える漢字語彙上級日本語学習者のための So this is for people who are advanced, high advanced level. The very important part of this book is the kangairu aspect, kangairu. So it doesn't tell you what the kanji is straight away. It tries to get you to think, for example. So it tries to get you to kind of connect the kanji and to see the bigger picture rather than you just drilling the word. So the kanji will look like this. It will show you, like, I guess, some examples, some of the words. This one is more beginner friendly because this is in English, so you do not need a high level of Japanese to understand. But because this one is aimed towards advanced learners, this is entirely in Japanese. So if you can't read Japanese, do not buy this book. It will have a certain sections, so kakunin shimashou, kangaemashou, and like different questions, I guess, to try and help you think, like, okay, this kanji and this kanji, put them together, what do you think it means? And this has really changed, this book has really changed the way that I study independently, which I'll go into later. Another book I'd like to recommend, which is a bit of a different book, but I think it's very interesting. I took a break from doing it because it's also quite mentally tasking. This is 中上級者のための速読の日本語第2版. So this is second edition. This is rapid reading Japanese, improving reading skills of intermediate and advanced students. So this book is different in the sense that it doesn't teach you Japanese, but instead it teaches you skills to help you better read Japanese, if that makes any sense. So it has examples and you have to do them within a certain time limit. It teaches you how to skim, it teaches you how to do this. Like, it's a very interesting book. I'd recommend it if you struggle with reading, or you kind of want to learn how to read in a different way. I recommend this book. This one has instructions in English along with the Japanese, so even if you don't have a full comprehension of Japanese, do not worry, this book does have English instructions. Okay, so book recommendations done. The other books that I used were all JLPT based, and I feel like the one I used the most was Try Nihongo, and it has different I guess, different classes. And if you are specifically studying Japanese to pass the JLPT, then I'd recommend those books because JLPT books and general Japanese language learning books are two different things. So I primarily did a lot of JLPT books, which is why I don't really have a lot of books to recommend because I did not study just to learn a language. I had also studied because of academics. Okay, now websites and apps and other sites you can use. Okay, Denshu.org is such a great site that I don't think people talk a lot about because I don't know why. I think it's underrated. I don't see a lot of people using it. And I just happened to come across it like several years ago. I don't use it nowadays because, as I said, my language learning methods have drastically changed and I no longer have to do the JLPT, so I no longer have to draw words for the JLPT. This website is really, really good if you want to drill vocabulary. Like, this is such a great site to use. It's such a, and it's free. Well, it has like a paid plan, but I always use the free plan, and it's helped me just fine. It has already inbuilt vocabulary packs, and then basically you can just, it gives you like multiple choice, or you can type it in, and I feel like that either way it kind of helps you really get to know the reading, and reading is especially important for when you want to write, when you want to read, and whatever. The other site I would like to recommend, this is for the dictionary website that I use to this day, jisho.org. So jisho.org. This is such a good resource, and the thing is, it's not just a dictionary. It um it can be such a good resource for when you want to find words but you don't know all the kanji in the word, when you want to find a specific kanji but um, you don't know how to write it. Like, it's such a good resource and it's free. Like, don't you guys love free stuff? So jisho.org, you can do it to use so many things. Like, you can use it to say, I want to find a word and I know the first two kanji, but I don't know the last. Maybe it's too hard and I don't know the reading. So what you do, you can put two of those kanjis and then put an asterisk at the end. And that asterisk is signals that you want to find a word that has these two kanji in the front and then has another kanji that you don't know at the end. And it will show you like all the words it could possibly be, and it's so useful for when you're trying to find that word but you just don't know, and it can do so much. It's basically a very powerful, well, I think it says it like a very powerful Japanese to English dictionary, and it is, it is a very powerful resource, and it will probably help you every step of the way in your Japanese language learning journey. I've been using it for years and I still use it practically every day. I got tabs in my phone and it's just words and words and words of jisho. Another dictionary website that I would like to recommend is Weblio. Now, Weblio is in Japanese because actually it's not a Japanese to English dictionary for Japanese language learners. It's for Japanese people or Japanese native speakers who are learning English. So it's kind of like the audience is different, but it's still a good resource um, for if you want to learn Japanese as well, because it will give you the English translation and it will give you examples in Japanese and English. And yeah, I use that as well when I can't find the word that I'm looking for on Jisho. Then I'll go to weblio or another Japanese dictionary website and try and find it. The last website I would like to recommend that I'm still using and I'll talk a bit more about in my study ventures segment is kakuyomu, and kaku means to write in Japanese and yomu means to read. So kakuyomu is a online novel, maybe like the equivalent of, I don't know, Wattpad. I guess, yeah, it's basically Japanese Wattpad. People just post their free stories and they have lots of different genres, so sci-fi, horror, romance, comedy, and they have different tags and stuff like that. I would recommend this more for people who want to read a lot more Japanese and maybe they don't want to read articles anymore, or they can't really afford to buy books, because I understand my Japanese tutor used to recommend me to read books all the time, and buying books costs money and sometimes it's just hard. Where what is so great about kakuyomu is that it's in snippets, like it's in chapters, so you don't even have to read the whole thing. You can just read one bit and it's great. Basically, I recommend this more for intermediate people though. If you're a beginner, I would say stick with easy NHK or whatever you're currently using, or just stick to the books. When you're more confident, come over to our side and start trying to read lengthier texts, because reading Japanese is really all about exposure, practice, and experience. Another resource, I wouldn't say a resource, but I think I use this a lot when it comes to reading, nicovideo, which is basically Japanese YouTube, and it has a lot of videos on any subject. But one of the biggest, I guess, differences between the comment section of nicovideo and the comment section of on YouTube is that nicovideo, the comments scroll across the video, like they're timestamped, so people comment at certain points in the video. So unlike YouTube, where you kind of comment, you can point to a specific part of the video with like a timestamp in your comment. And on nicovideo, you will actually post your comment at the time that you want it to be commented, and then when you play back that video, if you keep the comments on, then your comment will show up when at that time. So the comments will constantly be scrolling past the screen, right? So obviously, because they're going at a certain speed, it helped a lot with my reading, because it trained me to read a lot faster. Because if I want to keep up with these comments, I need to keep reading, and that kind of helped me improve my reading skills. So I used to go on nicovideo every day. I still use it a lot, and just watch videos, random videos of any subject, and just read comments. Like, yes, I would enjoy the content of the video, but my focus was on reading those comments. And I would say it's a more lax way of learning how to read, especially when the comments can be quite simple. I just think exposing yourself to just reading a lot is very useful, and no matter how you do it, no matter what site is on, as long as you're constantly trying to feed yourself information, expose yourself to different things, I think your reading skills would dramatically improve. Judging by my resources, you can see I'm not really focused on speaking, because learning how to speak better, to be honest, it should come with time. I think people overhype speaking skills a lot, to be honest, because I understand, like, you want to be talking, but why would you only want to just know how to speak Japanese, but then when someone shows you like a brochure in Japanese, you're like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know why. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much, but those are the resources that I personally want to advocate for. For speaking, I don't know, man, like go on Hello Talk or something. But before Hello Talk, there used to be a site, well, it still exists, called jref.com, and they had like a exchange, and you would post a message. That's how I first started having language partners. It's so weird to think that before Hello Talk I was using a completely different site, and I have so many weird experiences from using that site. Like the people that specifically came to me for language exchange, they were not talking to me for language exchange, let me tell you that. Okay, my last resource that I would like to talk about is for the people, you like the anime and the mangas and that, alright? You people, I haven't forgotten about you. You can learn Japanese through anime and manga. I'm not trying to, say that's not a good resource. I'm just saying that if you want to learn the bread and butter, the meat, the foundation, the solid foundations, there's a lot more better resources that you can go to really get to know the grasp. And sometimes you're not going to get that from anime and manga, because at the end of the day, that's entertainment. That's you're watching it to, or reading it to enjoy it. Something like this is specifically designed to help you learn the language. Anime isn't designed to help you learn Japanese. Anime is designed to be watched and enjoyed. So I would say keep anime and manga as primarily entertaining things. Like, just watch it to have fun, and I don't know, or read it to have fun. But I think what you can use to actually learn Japanese is not anime and manga in my experience, it's actually games. Yes. Games are the real, that's where you're gonna get the real learning from. Let me tell you why games. And not just any game, okay? Visual novels. What is a visual novel? Let me explain quickly for you. A visual novel is basically a story that is conveyed through images and text and audio sometimes. And sometimes you have, it's kind of like a choose your adventure type of thing. And sometimes you can make your choices, even. What is very good about visual novels is that you can read and you can listen at the same time. So say the text will be there and the person speaking, oh, I don't know how to read this word. But then the person will say it for you. So you're like, oh, that's how you read this word. So if you are a girl, or not really even a girl, if you like romance, yeah, there's this. I'm gonna be real quiet. If you like romance, there's this genre called otome, and it's a genre where basically you romance boys into liking your character. And yes, it's romance, but there's so many different genres within that, and you can learn quite a lot from them. And don't feel bad if you're romancing fictional anime, guys, because it's actually very useful and you can use it as a learning resource. I promise you. Get a Nintendo Switch, buy a Japan Nintendo, what is it, the prepaid card, go nuts, go wild, go crazy, buy up those ultimate games, have yourself a jolly good time. It'll be great. Or if you are a guy or whatever, and you like the opposite, you can buy the equivalent for I guess aimed towards men. You can romance girls instead, or just there's so many you can do. Like enjoy. Okay. Okay, so that's my resources done. Alright, let me go into basically the last part, my study ventures, and let me tell you what I've been studying, and because I need to talk to somebody, please. Look at my book, guys. Look at this little grungy Hello Kitty sticker that I put on to try and make it look cute. This is a very simple book. This book cost me like £2.99 from Ryman. Big up ryman.co.uk. Okay, and in this book what I like doing is that every time I study I put in the dates, and it's so nice to look over the dates. It's like a little diary of sorts, I guess. So I started this notebook on the 30th of September 2020, coincidentally the same day that I've handed in my last assignment. I literally handed it in the day before, and then the day after I was like, I'm done with my university, let's study Japanese by myself. I work fast. So I had some goals. It's so funny looking at my goals back then because they're not the goals that I have now. My goals back then was keigo. Okay, if you don't know what keigo is, it's basically the polite way, the honorific way of speaking in Japanese, and there are several aspects to it. Kenjogo, which is like when you humble yourself because you don't want to be too uppity. Sonkeigo, when the person that you're speaking to, or whatever. So like, say you're talking to person B and person A is like in a higher position than you. Maybe person A is your boss and you're talking to person B about person A. You'd use sonkeigo because you can't be talking about person A and acting like man's your friend, because man's not your friend, man's your superior now. Then kenjogo, say you're talking to person A, right? You're talking about yourself. This is a very I guess truncated way of explaining what keigo is. You're talking about yourself. You can't be talking about yourself like you're a big man. You're a little guy, okay? You're below person A. So you must talk about yourself like, oh. You know when you say arigato gozaimasu? What do you think the gozaimasu part of the arigato is? Fam, that's keigo right there, my brothers. Why am I speaking like this? Okay. Gozaimasu is keigo because you want to be polite. And to your friends, you could be like arigato and chuck off the gozaimasu, things like that. But if you want to be polite, you'd be like gozaimasu, you add the gozaimasu. It's very polite, yeah? And Keigo is very, 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 very hard, and I'm not very good at it. So don't ask me advice on how to speak Keigo because I'm not very good at it. Which is why I had made it a goal back a couple months ago, because I was like, let me speak Keigo. I even had a little schedule. I'm not gonna show you too much of it. Okay. Ooh. I even had a little timetable. How much I do. This is backwards, man. Who's gonna read that? So I do Keigo on Tuesdays, vocab and grammar on Thursdays, reading on Fridays, conversations on Wednesdays. Like, I have a whole schedule that I did not follow for long. So I had all these, like, there's so much. So I was mainly using the orange book that I showed earlier, and then another Keigo book that I bought but I'm not using right now, and some videos of Keigo. And basically I spent most times on the vocab book, and I would say, I don't know if it's a tip, but when I would write something, I'll write little notes to myself or little reviews, like how am I feeling today, like random stuff like that. And I still do this because I just think it's very important to, I guess, not only just study and write down information, but also write down how you feel, like, and always keeping, I guess, in tune with your emotions, because your emotions are very important. And what am I talking about anyways? And one of the things that I like to look back in this book is something that I wrote on the 8th of October 2020. So I'll read it out because it's not that personal. It says, today I lacked a little bit of energy and motivation. I realized I've been studying every day for over a week. It's tiring at times, but I'm proud that I've been so committed despite my shortcomings. I wanted to leave this here as a reminder that me studying Japanese is out of my own will, and that this book is a place for study and practice and not a writing practice journal. I'll rest up and try again tomorrow. And I just like to look at this note that I wrote myself sometimes, because it's true. I am learning Japanese out of my own will. Like, I'm doing it because I want to. And this isn't a writing practice journal because my notes are not always the neatest, and sometimes I don't like how I write somewhere sometimes. But again, past self was right. This ain't a writing practice journal. This is a language, like, learning diary of sorts. So I finished this notebook on the 2nd of January 2021. So this book covers like 3 months of my independent language learning journey. So after I finished this book, I was like, oh my days, let me buy myself a little gift to treat myself. And I bought a personalized book of Etsy, and I got it with like Japanese on the cover, and it has on the binder my Japanese studies and number 2, which indicates is my second notebook, I guess. And I started this one on the 13th because I had to wait for it to come in the post. Very irritating. I was waiting a long time. So from January I started focusing on hatson. Hatson in Japanese, because speaking in Japanese, there's like pitch, accents. There's so many videos about it, like it can go up, it can go down, like a roller coaster, Like, for example, hashi, hashi. So hashi, when it goes up, is chopsticks. Hashi, Oh my days, this is the other way around. Oh my days, if I give incorrect information. Anyways, depending on whether it goes up at the end or down at the end, for some words, so hashi and like there's hashi the bridge and then like hashi the chopsticks, and depending on the tonal pitch you can tell like you're supposed to pronounce it in a certain way, but come on now, like hashi watata or hashi oskae, like you can tell by the context what hashi you're talking about, so I wouldn't be too concerned over tonal accents, but it can help kind of make a Japanese sound more natural and more like a native. And if you're really, I guess, hyper fixated on that, then you can like learn it, I guess. I feel like I've been talking for so long and I'm not saying anything. Dang. Anyways, so I did mention that the Kangaru Goyen Kanji book, that orange book, has changed the way that I approach learning Japanese, and I'd like to explain. So, what I end up using a lot nowadays is kakuyomu and then also other news sites. And usually my process is that, okay, let me find a page. This is so messy. So here's an example of a page. This is from a story. You can read it. I'm currently reading it. It's called Hanamachi no Yojimbo, and it's basically a story about this girl. It's like set in like ancient China, and it's about this girl who is a bodyguard in the red light district, and then she gets hired to be a bodyguard in the imperial palace and whatnot. So this is from chapter 8, and here's me writing all the words I don't know, and as you can see there's notes. This is me thinking about the words and not looking them up immediately. So okay, this one. So the first kanji is like kizu or sho, and then the second one is ato, which is like a mark. So I'm thinking, okay, hurt, mark, does that mean scar? So I'm trying to think about the meaning from the word alone, from the kanji alone, and that was a tip, I guess, that I learned from this book. This book taught me how to think more proactively about reading Japanese and not always immediately trying to go to the meaning and actually look and be like, okay, what kanji compromise, like what does this word compromise of? Because kanji is not just writing, like kanjis have individual meanings and then they come together to make a larger meaning, or they can be used to like be used as a way to of sound. So like it can be used for its sound and it can be used for its meaning, and sometimes it's used for its sound and sometimes it's used for its meaning, but most of the time it's used for its meaning. So that's what the thinking part goes to. This is what I do almost every day. Well, not every day now, but most of the days. And I've learned a lot this way, and I write the same words over and over again, and it's fun. Like doing this is fun, and this way of studying I started when I was still in university, because I was struggling a bit, especially with making vocabulary lists. I started that because as part of my degree, like as part of the Japanese course, we had to basically make a language learning diary. So it wasn't just like we had to learn, we also had to detail our experiences. So I remember telling my teacher, I'm like, sometimes I'd write the kanji wrong, and she would say like, why don't you just make a notebook and then just put how you write it wrong and then how it's supposed to be written. And it's like, it seems like a very simple like suggestion, but making that notebook, I still have it. Like it was a tiny little notebook. It's in my room. I can't be bothered to bring it downstairs, but it's a tiny little notebook, and basically I started with that, and then I went more and I kept writing all this vocabulary, and I was just like, where I'm like literally picking up all these words from all these different places and compiling it all together, and it felt like my own little personal vocabulary book, I guess. So nowadays I don't look at vocabulary lists, I just make my own when the occasion suits for it, because I already know most of the words in these vocabulary lists, and I've already done that type of learning for my GLPT, and I think it's time for me to move on from that. It's time to move on from drilling, it's time to move on from trying to cram lots of information, and it's time for proactivity, and it's time for reflectivity. That's kind of my study ventures, I guess. That's how I've tackled learning for the past couple of months, and I feel like I'm going to continue using these methods until I find a new way of learning Japanese, but I'm fine where I am. Another thing that I started is writing. Like, writing is so underrated, like in Japanese language learning. Like, not just writing sentences, but writing prose, writing like an actual thing. Like, one of my goals now is to actually write a story in Japanese. And you're thinking, bro, that sounds too hard. That's why I want to do it. だからこそやりたいので, like, if you write as a hobby and you're fluent in Japanese, please, like, I want to talk to somebody. Like, I really want to learn how to write stories in Japanese. Anyways, that being said, let me go to the final part of this video so I can lie down, because I am tired of talking. Okay, so the last part of my video is about, will I still study Japanese? And the answer is yes. And yes, I have been studying Japanese for 8 years. And 8 years is a long time, and I've experienced so many things, I promise you. And I've learned so many things, but I still want to learn a lot more. And that's why I want to continue studying it. And what is going to happen to me now? Well, if all things go according to plan, I will be in Japan studying again at a Japanese university. And guess what I'll be studying? I'll be studying Japanese studies. Come on, guys. Woo! I'll be studying what I've already studied again. Good choice, me. But you know what, I am really excited for it, because I realized through my master's degree that I really like to study, well, research Japan in general, like anything. And being able to do that again at a Japanese university is like what could be better? So yes, okay. Now, with all that being said, I said what I wanted to say, so I'm gonna do a short message in Japanese, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. So, ここから日本語で話したいと思います。見てる方に、まず、日本語を勉強したいと思っているなら、まずひたすらやってみてください。本当に後悔しないようにやってみてください。Yeah, so, yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. Yeah, so, yes, that's all I have to say. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know how to wrap up this video. 見てくれて本当にありがとうございます。Thank you for watching this video. So, bye.